Hello, patrons. How's everybody doing? You know, now that I am in Columbus, I need to organize a fan meetup. And what I think I might do with this video is in like the next month or two, I think I'm gonna make this one of the public kind of videos that sort of reel people into Patreon. It's kind of say, hey, look, here's the kind of stuff that we do on Patreon. So you may see this go live on YouTube in like a month. But again, it's something that I think we do like once a quarter, I think like 4 times a year, maybe with the Versus video. So it's nothing too terrible. But in this video, we are going to be doing a battle royale of the Batman family. You guys really seem to enjoy the battle royale of the Green Lantern series, and so I was like, okay, let's see which one you guys want to do most, and you guys voted for a Batman battle royale. So this is the Bat family, right? And the winner of this battle royale will take on none other than Bruce Wayne himself. And so beginning with this whole thing, and to start things off, it only makes sense to start with Batman's oldest ally, Dick Grayson. And I guess technically Alfred would be Batman's oldest ally, but we're limiting this to only those who routinely see combat. I think that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So Dick Grayson has been around in comics for a long time, going all the way back to Detective Comics number 38 in 1940, when writers decided that kids reading comics needed a younger character that they could identify with. And so when Dick Grayson is introduced, we learn that he comes from a famous family of acrobats known as the Flying Graysons. Now, when some criminals sabotage the trapeze wires in the circus that they're performing in, Dick's parents tragically fall to their deaths. Now, before Dick can get to the police, he's approached by Batman, and the two bond over their shared history of losing their parents at a young age, and Batman ends up taking Dick Grayson under his wing and makes him his ward. And so during this time, Dick Grayson receives extensive training and adopts the superhero persona of Robin, becoming the first and most famous in a long line of sidekicks to use that moniker. Now, after spending several years as Robin, Dick decides that he's outgrown the role as Batman's sidekick and adopts the new codename of Nightwing, named after a Kryptonian superhero that he met during an adventure in the preserved Kryptonian city of Kandor. Now, as Nightwing, Dick served as the leader of the Teen Titans as well as a solo hero, and briefly took up the mantle of Batman after Bruce Wayne seemingly died during Final Crisis. Now, Nightwing possesses great acrobatic skill due to his extensive training with his family from a very, very young age. He's also skilled in multiple forms of martial arts due to his training with Batman and Richard Dragon, and has mastered the art of fighting with Kali sticks in addition to his extreme proficiency as a hand-to-hand combatant. Now, in addition to being at peak human levels of strength, endurance, agility, and reflexes, he's extremely intelligent and an adept detective, and is skilled in stealth, escapology, and disguise. Now, due to his proficiency as a fighter and detective, Nightwing was a natural choice to replace Bruce Wayne when it was believed that Bruce had died at the end of Final Crisis. And so when Dick became Nightwing, it left Batman without a sidekick for a pretty lengthy period of time. And Batman editor Len Wein made the decision to introduce a new sidekick to fill the void, which prompted writer Jerry Dugan and artist Don Newton to introduce Jason Todd in Batman number 357 in 1983. Now, Jason Todd was a troubled orphan who Batman catches trying to steal the tires from the Batmobile in Crime Alley of Gotham City, where Batman's parents were essentially murdered. Now later, after a stint in a group home, Jason assists Batman in catching some criminals, and Batman brings him in as his next sidekick, fearing that Jason would become a criminal if Batman didn't do this. Batman fans, however, were not fully receptive of the new Robin, so much so that they famously, with the help of somebody who manipulated the whole phone system, voted for Jason to die in a fan poll during DC's Death of the Family event, which ultimately led to his death at the hands of the Joker in 1988. Now, Jason would remain absent from comics until 2005, when he reappears as a masked vigilante named Red Hood, who essentially acts as an antagonist to Batman. But eventually, the two reconcile and become allies, although Batman disapproves of Jason's willingness to kill his enemies. And so Red Hood received the same training as Nightwing, although he is not the same kind of natural athlete that Dick Grayson was. In addition to his prowess in hand-to-hand combat, Red Hood is also an expert marksman and incorporates an extensive cache of heavy-duty firearms and bladed weaponry into his arsenal. Now, after Jason's death, Batman obviously needed another Robin, and that's where Tim Drake comes in. Now, Tim Drake debuted in Batman number 436 in 1989 and was the son of a wealthy family that demonstrates an extremely high intellect at a very young age, which leads him to discover the secret identities of Batman and Robin. Now, after finding out that Dick Grayson is Robin, he begins training himself to eventually take up the mantle one day, and following the death of Jason Todd, approaches Batman and convinces him to make him his new sidekick. Now, Tim eventually adopts the nickname of of Red Robin and goes from being Batman's sidekick to more of an ally. Now, Tim's training is virtually identical to his predecessors, making him an adept combatant, but what really sets him apart is his intelligence. He is undoubtedly the best detective of the Robins and perhaps even more skilled than Batman himself, and is also skilled at computer science and various other scientific disciplines. Now, to round out the Robins, we have Damian Wayne. Now, Damian made his debut in Batman number 655 in 2006 and is the son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul, the daughter of Batman's longtime enemy Ra's al Ghul, that was basically grown in an artificial womb and raised in the League of Assassins, where he receives training to become, you guessed it, an assassin. Now, eventually, Talia informs Bruce that he has a son, and Damian takes up the mantle of Robin. But there's a near constant butting of heads between him and Batman due to Batman's policy of not killing, which of course goes against everything that Damian Wayne learned from the League of Assassins. Now, Damian is probably the best among the Robins in terms of fighting skill, having received training basically since he was born, and has actually proven himself to be more skilled than both Tim Drake and Jason Todd when he's fighting them. And so while the Robin mantle is the most recognizable and iconic of the Batman allies, the mantle of Batgirl has also been an integral role filled by a variety of characters. The best known of these is of course Barbara Gordon, the daughter of Gotham Police Commissioner Jim Gordon. Now, Barbara Gordon first appeared in Detective Comics number 359 in 1967 in an attempt to introduce a female character that would increase female viewership of the Batman television show. Now, when Barbara is introduced, she is attending a costume party dressed as Batman and sees Bruce Wayne get kidnapped by a supervillain named Killer Moth. Yes, Killer Moth was an actual name. Now, Barbara ends up stopping Killer Moth, which prompts Batman to forge an alliance with her as the two of them fight crime. Now, Barbara remains in the role of Batgirl until she's shot and paralyzed by the Joker during the Killing Joke storyline of 1988. After that, she's confined to a wheelchair and adopts the new role of Oracle, using her expertise and technology to aid her allies remotely. But when DC rolled out the New 52 in 2011, Barbara was rebooted to regain her ability to walk and reprised her role as Batgirl. Now, Barbara is a skilled martial artist, possesses an extremely high intellect and photographic memory, and is a highly skilled computer hacker. Now, while Barbara is the most widely recognized Batgirl, she's far from the only individual to use that alter ego. Helen Bertinelli, the daughter of a notorious crime family in Gotham City, first began operating as a vigilante known as the Huntress after she was framed for 2 murders and receives training from Richard Dragon and the Question before returning to Gotham to avenge the murder of her family. Now, Huntress and Batman are often at odds, given his disapproval of her violent methods in dealing with criminals. And after Helena briefly adopts the mantle of Batgirl during the No Man's Land story in 1999, she has a falling out with Batman and gives up the Batgirl cowl and returns to her Huntress persona, primarily working with the birds of prey. And so Huntress is skilled in hand-to-hand combat as well as with a variety of weapons, but historically has used a crossbow as her primary weapon. Now, the next person to adopt the Batgirl persona is Cassandra Cain, who first appeared in Batman number 567 in 1999. Now, Cassandra's father David was a bodyguard for Ra's al Ghul, and her mother is the famous assassin Lady Shiva. Now, Cassandra was taught to be an assassin from birth by her father, but was not taught how to read or write, instead focusing all her attention on learning to read only the body language of her enemies. Now, after killing a man and seeing the emotion on her face, she left her father and turns up in Gotham City, where she saves Jim Gordon's life and becomes a new Batgirl under the tutelage of Bruce Wayne. Now, since the New 52 went into effect, Cassandra has gone by the alias Orphan, after the name her father had previously used, and it doesn't seem she ever used the Batgirl alias in this continuity, instead basically being taken in by Batman and befriending Batman's allies Harper Row and Stephanie Brown. Now, Orphan is an incredibly skilled fighter, arguably the most skilled of the Bat family, with the possible exception of Damian Wayne, largely due to her ability to anticipate the moves of her opponents as well as her extremely high pain tolerance. And so finally, we have Stephanie Brown, who first appeared in Detective Comics in number 647 in 1992. Stephanie is the daughter of the supervillain Clue Master, who begins working as a vigilante by the name Spoiler because of her mission to spoil her father's plans. Now, when Tim Drake temporarily steps away from his role as Robin to try and live a normal life, Stephanie fills the void, but is tortured and apparently killed by the Black Mask. Now, it's later revealed that Stephanie's death was fate, and that after the apparent death of Bruce Wayne, Cassandra Cain gives her Batgirl costume to Stephanie, who adopts the mantle, giving her the distinction of being the only person to serve as both Robin and Batgirl. Now, in the New 52 continuity, we we've only ever seen Stephanie in her original spoiler persona, and Stephanie is a skilled martial artist and acrobatic and is set apart by her expertise as a tracker. And so in addition to all the Robins and all the Batgirls, there are a few other members of the Bat family that we need to go over to get a definitive answer as to who would win in this gigantic battle royale. Now the first of these is Jean-Paul Valley, also known as Azrael, who first appeared in Batman Sword of Azrael #1 in 1992. Now Jean-Paul was part of the Sacred Order of Saint Dumas, a secret order of assassins who was brainwashed into forgetting the fact that his father had died and it was time for him to take over for him, at which point his memory was restored. Now he fights alongside Batman and becomes an apprentice of sorts until Batman is paralyzed by Bane and Azrael takes the mantle in his place. Now as Batman, Jean-Paul Valley is far more brutal than Bruce ever was because it was the 1990s and everything had to be super edgy. And eventually Bruce heals from his injuries and retakes the Batman cowl. Now Azrael has seemingly superhuman physical abilities including endurance, durability, reflexes, and agility due to his partially enhanced genetics having been created in a test tube and his genes having been spliced with animal DNA. Now Azrael is also an expert fighter and is bested Batman in combat and utilizes armor and a flaming sword as part of his arsenal. Now Katherine Kane, better known as Batwoman, first appeared in 52 #7 in 2006. Now after being kicked out of the US military academy because of her sexuality, she descends into a destructive lifestyle until she meets Batman after being attacked and defeating a mugger. Now this inspires her to begin her career as a crime fighter and she steals body armor and weapons from the military base where her father works. Now when she trains with experts around the world for 2 years, she returns to Gotham and adopts the persona of Batwoman and frequently serves as an ally of Batman and mentor to younger members of the Bat family. Now Batwoman is an expert gymnast and was an elite military student that's received training in a variety of combat styles as well as strategy and survival techniques, making her an extremely formidable fighter in her own right. Now moving on to Luke Fox. He's the son of longtime Wayne Enterprises executive and innovator of Batman's technology, Lucius Fox. Now he first appeared in Batman #19 in 2013, and he takes over the Batwing title from David Zavimbe, a member of Batman Incorporated who gave up that mantle. Now like other members of the Bat family, Luke is a skilled combatant and also possesses a genius level intellect, but primarily relies on his armored batsuit and a variety of gadgets such as retractable wings, cloaking, and healing technology, as well as bulletproof armor. And so finally, we have the most recent addition to the Bat family, Duke Thomas, also known as the Signal. Now Duke first appeared in Batman #21 in 2014, and we're introduced to him as a young man whose parents fall victim to the Joker toxin during Batman Endgame. Now Duke forms a group of teens that fight crime in Gotham City, all while wearing the symbol of Batman's sidekick Robin, and is eventually brought in by Batman as a sidekick. Now Duke differs from everyone else on the list in that he's a metahuman and possesses the ability to look at the past or a few seconds into the future, as well as analyze his opponent's weaknesses. Now he also has a high-level deductive reasoning, having trained his whole life to come up with a riddle that couldn't be solved after the Riddler caused a hurricane to hit Gotham City. And so now that we've gotten a sense of what all these Bat family members can bring to the table, the question is, how would this battle play out? So, assuming that all these characters are in a every man or every woman scenario, there are a few characters that would be eliminated fairly early on for one reason or another. For example, when we consider Spoiler, although she is an adept crime fighter, she really doesn't bring anything to the table that isn't done better by someone else. She's not the best fighter, she doesn't have the most impressive physical stats, and even though she is intelligent, there are some that possess higher intellects. And so when Spoiler has to battle someone like Nightwing or Orphan, she's going to be in way over her head. And then we have characters who would be plagued by a lack of experience. Duke Thomas is a metahuman, but even with his superhuman ability to look into the future, he's never displayed the fighting prowess as some of the other combatants. And I see someone like Damian that's one of the most skilled fighters in the DC universe, and I think that Duke would find himself completely outmatched. Now on paper, Batwing would seem to be a likely contender to win this battle given the advanced tech suit that he wears, which would obviously give him a physical advantage over his opponents. However, when you have computer experts like Tim Drake and Barbara Gordon in the field, either of them could find a way to hack the computer running Batwing's suit and simply just shut it off. And so without his suit, Batwing would have to rely on his physical combat skills, which just are not on the same level as others. And so even with those three eliminated, we still have have a lot of work to do in narrowing down this field. And so for how this battle would play out, I think most of these characters will duke it out on the street in hand-to-hand or close-range combat, with a couple of exceptions. For example, I think Tim Drake is going to rely on his strength as a computer expert to do most of his fighting remotely, through drones or some sort of technology that would allow him to monitor and attack his opponents from afar with the goal of avoiding close quarters combat, which is his most glaring weakness. Red Hood, on the other hand, will differ in strategy from most of the Bat family in that he incorporates firearms into his arsenal, so he can literally sit up on a rooftop somewhere and pick people off from afar. And so that leaves Nightwing, Damian, Batgirl, Batwoman, Orphan, Azrael, and Huntress duking it out on the street. And that melee is going to come down to fighting skill and physical superiority. Now, I want to take this opportunity to point out that for this battle, I'm going to assume that all these characters are going all out and they're not pulling any punches because they're friends. And so that is going to neutralize Huntress' advantage of being the most brutal, since she can really only capitalize on this if the other characters are holding back. Since they aren't, I think her fighting skill is not quite high enough as the others here, and she'll ultimately be eliminated. I also think that we can eliminate Batgirl for the same reason. She's a great fighter, but not on the level of Damian or Orphan, and is nowhere near as physically formidable as Nightwing, so I really can't see her taking any of them out. Now, probably the most difficult of these characters to place is going to be Azrael. The reason I say that is that he's been written very inconsistently in the pre and post New 52 continuities. Prior to the New 52, Azrael was capable of beating Bruce Wayne in combat, but he's been written as being significantly weaker in the post Flashpoint continuity. Still, he is made formidable by the armor that he wears that allows him to fly, and the flaming sword he carries that could be a game changer. But in the current continuity, he relies on the Suit of Sorrows, which houses an artificial intelligence that allows him to identify the weaknesses of his opponents. Now, I think he would be a strong contender to win this thing if it weren't for the factor of Tim Drake being able to potentially hack into or disable that AI, which could neutralize his advantage to some extent. But even without his armor functioning at 100%, he's still an incredibly skilled fighter and will be tough to defeat. Now, as for Batwoman, she's going to approach this battle very strategically, and that will get her pretty far into this conflict, as she's going to strike at the most opportune times instead of just doing it randomly. She's going to be able to hold her own in combat with nearly anyone around her, and really at this point, it's going to become very difficult to parse through who's going to win, as each of the combatants have many of the same strengths and weaknesses. Damian and Orphan have received extensive training from the time that they were very young, so it can be tempting to say that they will have the upper hand, but we have to keep in mind that both of them are still exceedingly young, and so in terms of actual real-world experience, they still trail behind the older characters, not to mention that they're not as physically mature as Nightwing, Batwoman, or Azrael, so I can't really see them emerging victorious, because it really just comes down to the fact that they just can't kick or punch hard enough. And of those three, I see Nightwing being the last one standing, and I really can see it going either way. It just seems that in the current continuity, Azrael hasn't been shown to be the fighter that Nightwing is, as Nightwing is usually compared to Batman in terms of skill, and for that reason, I think he could take down Batwoman as well. And so, essentially, we have Tim Drake operating remotely, Jason Todd lurking in the shadows trying to snipe people, and Nightwing, who's been through the fight of his life and probably exhausted. And the fact that Tim and Jason haven't even had to mix it up yet, I think it's going to allow either of them, probably Jason, to simply just take out Nightwing from afar, even though Nightwing can, in normal circumstances, avoid Jason's shots. But at this point, he's going to be too physically spent, and this will be his undoing. And so who wins between Jason and Tim? Well, I think Red Hood would undoubtedly win this if the two were made to trade blows, but I don't think Tim is going to let it get to that point. In my mind, Tim operates much like Batman, and he knows these guys. He's fought alongside and occasionally against them, and so he's going to have contingencies in place for all of them. And that might seem like an anticlimactic end to this, but this is, after all, a Batman story. And Batman, as we all know, can make up for any deficiencies he may have through preparation and intellect, and Tim operates in the exact same way. Now, if Tim does not have any prep time and he's just thrown in the middle of this melee, then all this changes and there's no way he wins, and is probably among the first to be defeated, in fact. But if this were a comic book, I think we'd find out that Tim, much like Bruce, would have essentially been planning for this eventuality for a very long time. And so with that being said, if we were to take this one step further and we pit Tim against Batman, what would happen? Well, at this point in Tim's life, I don't think he's going to be able to out-Batman Batman. If Tim has contingencies, Bruce has contingencies upon contingencies. In addition to that, while Batman may not actually be as advanced in computer science as Tim is, he is undoubtedly going to have access to technology that Tim doesn't, since he has pretty much unlimited money, something that Tim does not have. Now, Bruce himself has said that Tim will likely one day be a better Batman than he is, and while that may be true, that day is not today. And at this point, no one's going to be beating Batman at his own game. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Thank you all for being patrons. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. It's certainly the longest of the Versus videos we've had so far, but it was really, really cool. I really love doing this. So make sure you guys keep an eye out for the poll that we do in the next day or two. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace. Okay, I want to give a shout out to Kyle B, David Joseph, Ben, John H, AJ, Matt N, Jeff R, John H, Lean and Mean, which is an awesome name, Jason C, Austin S, Austin H, Joey M, Steven Z, Austin B, Adam K, and Genosis 916. Remember guys, you can send me messages and I'll run off whatever your message is at the end of the video, so long as there's nothing crazy. But if you want to put a message in there, send me an email, rob@robertjefferson.com. And if you are one of these people who gets shout outs, then I will tack it in there. And yeah, thanks for watching guys.